Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. Hello, Dr. Memon. Thanks
Hi.
for joining us this afternoon. And uh, good afternoon or good evening for wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today in our CFFLive session. We have been doing these sessions for quite some time now, considering that a lot of us are not being able to connect in person. Typically, we go through a number of topics that have been relevant not only for this particular pandemic crisis that we're dealing with, but also long-standing and long-term scenarios that we have been working with several friends of CFF, such as Dr. Memon. Most of the challenges that we have kind of observed now and discussed and debated and probably sought solutions are around the industry and the organizations. I think it is if not more important, but definitely one of the most important aspects of the future of cyber is the academia and the role that the academicians, the schools, and the students that we're preparing to join the industry and the organizations play in this role. In our conversations with the last several weeks and iterations of CFFLive sessions that we have done, and our conversations, both public and private, have been around issues that are related to how are we responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and what are we learning. But I think as we have come to a stage where the response has kind of stabilized, we have got to know what works, what doesn't in this current situation. A lot of this was just by instinct, if not by a playbook. Nobody had a playbook to attend to this crisis. Specifically in the academic scenario where there is more in-person and interaction, the the learnings, especially in traditional organizations and leading organizations such as institutes such as NYU, has been in person. But with Dr. Memon, what we have realized over the years is that the work that he has put in the online aspect and reaching out to a broader global audience that typically is as a channel to getting the benefits of the level of education that NYU provides. I think has been a great movement, and one of the pioneers has been Dr. Memon himself in expanding the online asset. So this afternoon we are glad to have Dr. NasirMemon join us as Vice Dean of Online Education of NYU Tandon program, and I'll let him give a little bit of background of the various facets that he brings in and the organizations and initiatives that he is part of, and then we'll speak about some of the challenges that are very personal that he has dealt with in his academic and academic affairs role, and also the work that we have been doing together in expanding cyber capacity. So, Dr. Memon, welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Val. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure talking to you always. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nasir Memon. I'm a professor here in the Computer Science and Engineering Department in NYU's Tandon School of Engineering. Perhaps many of you know me as the person who started the cybersecurity program at NYU more than 2 decades ago, right, before it was kind of considered to be such an important thing. And over the years, I've sort of founded the Center for Cybersecurity at NYU and at NYU's Abu Dhabi campus as well. Founded Seesaw, which is sort of the largest student-run activity, cybersecurity related event in the world. Started symposium for women, and I've done lots of activities in trying to get more women in cybersecurity. So for a long time, I was focusing on cybersecurity research and education. And about 3 years ago, I was asked to sort of run the online programs at NYU's Tandon School of Engineering. And I guess it was a lucky move in some sense. I don't know. I was just finishing sort of 3 years as the chair of the department, and I wanted to move on and do new things. And education was at the top of my mind. I mean, I'd done research for 2 decades, but I wanted to do something in education, and the online offer was really something that I jumped at, and I'm glad I did that. And today I run the online program, and it's the right time. I guess Val and me will get into discussions about why I think online education will become more important in the near future and going forward. And so maybe I'll stop here and let Val ask some questions and respond.
Sure. Thank you again, Dr. Memon. We spoke several times before this, right? And then we've been
Mhm.
working on expanding cyber capacity, or on expanding the reach of cyber security education programs. When the March, around early March, when schools started shutting down, and there was social distancing in place, you were in the thick of this entire, in the capital of COVID-19 crisis in New York. Hopefully things are getting better as they seem. But what was your initial reaction when you had to move, when NYU had to move from this in-person campus-oriented to heavily leverage what you have built over time? What was it like?
So actually, so I'd been running the online program for 3 years. I'd started some uh, novel programs, not just in cybersecurity, but other programs. And clearly, faculty around campus knew about some of the programs. For example, the Bridge program, which allows people from non-STEM background to transition into a computing master's, the Cyber Fellows program, which was an affordable online program, etc. Right? So they kind of looked at me and said, "What do we do?" And I mean, my first reaction was, I have no idea. Because creating an online course is not a trivial, simple task. Teaching online is not simply a matter of getting on Zoom and lecturing, right? But there was so little time, and we have a week to uh, get online, right? We have a week to start giving instruction via online channels. What do we do? Of course, uh, we could not create the learning experiences that we typically do in a purely online program. But there's certain standard things that I felt were key in making the online learning experience more important. And so we kind of started focusing on that, saying, okay, let's. There are lots of faculty, a large number of them, who had never taught remotely before. So we kind of started more of a training, best practices, getting to know sort of a program with 2 or 3 things in mind, right? One is that understand that when a student is remote, it's a very different experience than when they are in a classroom. That peer group sitting around them is gone all of a sudden, right? And peer pressure, if you will, for a lack of a better word, is very important to learning, right? You learn together with your friends, with your classmates. It's not simply a transfer that takes place from the professor to you. Actually, learning goes. There's a lot of learning that takes place through that social interaction with your peers, and that suddenly was gone in the sense that these on-campus students didn't have any experience of that. So suddenly learning became sitting in your bedroom, maybe in your pajamas, and listening to somebody on the screen, right? And that's not what learning should be. So we kind of emphasized to faculty that, hey, um, uh, it's make sure that there is engagement, right? Learning is not simply about giving a lecture, but teaching is not simply about giving a lecture, but engaging the students, reaching out to them, being proactive, making the expectations clear, giving feedback promptly, etc. Right? In a very individual manner. Uh, Rather than the fancy videos and all the technology and all the dancing animations, they are not as important as the professors engagement, willingness to engage, and being proactive and setting expectations, letting people know what exactly they're supposed to be doing this week and checking them, giving them feedback, etc. So that, and then creating experiences where sort of people engage with each other, right? Students get to engage with each other because they were suddenly isolated, right? So that was the kind of way we started. Of course, looking forward now, there are many opportunities which we can discuss, but that's the way we started really, because the problem was just too big. Suddenly 1,000 classes, you just cannot uh,
Not
create
everything up.
optimized learning experiences for them, right?
Right. And you highlighted on one thing which really caught on to me is that learning is a social experience. It's not just a one-way transfer of knowledge, right? And
Right,
I think
right.
it is a peer driven exercise and experience altogether, and that's why we enjoyed the time in school.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, but do you think, especially on the cyber side, so there is so much of technical and digital interaction. Do you think some topics and some subjects are more have the benefit of taking advantage of this? For example, you cannot have a chemistry lab at house, right? You have to go to the experiments in a lab setting, or same applies to several others, biology and all that. But specifically cyber, and when you started this program several years back, right?
Hmm.
Did you pick and choose on certain topics that were more easily kind of shared and learned on the student side for online?
Yeah. So, I mean, I picked cyber because I was the cyber guy, right? That's what I knew, kind of. And later on, as we added more programs, they were more computing related. I confess, right? So I understand that not all subjects are easier to, not all learning is easier to digitize, but nevertheless, I believe digitization of learning, right, is what is going to transform the industry. And that's what we are beginning to see today, right? We've talked about this for a long time, uh, and there's been some adoption, but maybe now we'll see the boost, right? Because digitization allows you many different things, right? First is flexibility, right? You don't have to be at a particular time and place in order to get your learning, right? For working professionals, that's a big deal, right? And especially in today, in the environment that we might see going forward, that'll be a big deal for everybody almost. The second is, sorry, I'm sitting outside my house in California, so there's some noise. The second is learning styles, right? So once you digitize, right, you can deliver that learning, digitized learning, can be consumed in many different ways. In a classroom, you cannot rewind a professor, right?
Mhm.
But once content is digitized, you can go about sort of through based on the kind of background you have, the kind of preparation you have, the kind of extra scaffolding that you might need.
Mhm.
So also learning styles, right? Some people prefer active learning. Some people like to prefer to listen to a lecture for a long time, and then all that can be sort of brought to bear. You can't do that in a single classroom, but when we are online, one can better deliver. Our students can consume it based on their learning preferences. And so I think that's a tremendous advantage. Also, if content is digitized, you can always just go and you're doing networking and you say, oh, what was that algorithm to control congestion in TCP/IP or something of that sort. The content is there. You can go look it up. It can be linked, and you can go back and forth in non-linear manner using the content. But the content has to be designed appropriately to allow these things. So I think I agree that chemistry is probably a stretch, but I think even there, if you're innovative, there's a lot of improvements that you can bring to learning, uh, exploiting the digitization thing. And I think the other thing about digitization is that it allows you to scale,
Mhm.
right? suddenly you're not constrained by the confines of a classroom.
Sure.
And we have seen in the last 2 decades how Silicon Valley sort of took different business models, different verticals, and scaled them by digitization, right? And one can scale them. And what's the point of scaling? Well, scaling can give you affordability. Scaling can lower cost, and scaling can then give you education. Can then help you create educational experiences that more students can afford, right? And they can bring down the cost of higher education that we've been sort of complaining about all these years. So
No, that's absolutely right. I think, from what we have seen, the flexibility that learning provides and the offline content that people can go refer back to,
right.
and the exposure to the vast array of being connected directly, as you are studying is definitely an advantage. You mentioned something around like affordability, right? So I think, this is not just a learning exercise, it's also an economic exercise, in the sense that
Yeah.
the way NYU probably was limited to the confines of its classroom, now is available online, and so many other universities and schools and learning institutions are doing this as well. Where do you think it leads to I'll ask two questions probably back to back. One is
Hmm.
affordability. You mentioned about that. The
Right.
other thing is the quality of the. You had a particular bar when you were at NYU to attend to, right? And I don't know how the administrative take on that is, but how is your exposure to a larger array of students now with this? I mean, can anybody become an NYU graduate? Is that the aspiration? Um, uh,
It's my personal aspiration. I cannot
I
speak
agree with
for
that.
all of NYU. So I believe education should be open as well. We put barriers, and we are proud of the fact that we are so selective. We are only admitting 10% of the students. And so, oh, wow, we are so good. I think that's not the right way to measure what the educational institution does. If we are able to expand and uplift more people, the more we can do that, the better we are. Of course, we were constrained by space is very expensive
Yeah.
in New York City, and we were constrained by the capacity. Online sort of takes that away, right? And what we've been trying to do, at least in the Tandon School of Engineering, is to create open environments, right? So we, for example, we would not admit people who were like below 3.0 GPA in the graduate school. And I myself used to complain that I had a 2.2 undergrad in my 2.2 GPA in my undergrad, and would you not admit me? Come on, give people a chance, right? So, in the online environment, why we were not doing it, not because we looked down upon them, but because we felt it was wrong to admit someone who would not succeed. Right? It was wrong to admit someone and set them up for failure if they were not prepared. Uh, but in the online environment with the affordability, right, what we've started doing is we are much more open on the admission, but then we say, hey, you got to get a B in your first two courses, otherwise you cannot continue, right? And so we've not wasted people's time and money
Okay.
in putting them in a program where they're not prepared for. It's not that they're not smart or capable or talented. It's just they need preparation to succeed
Right.
in courses. And if they lack it, if they lack the determination or time or the other personal issues that are stopping them, then a affordable program, I think it's much more easier to be open in there as opposed to an elite and
So expand
expensive.
opportunities to people
Right,
who could not in other ways, like,
right,
would have probably had to physically relocate
right,
to New
right,
York, or any
right.
other organizations, institutions,
Right.
and
And
then
the other,
that,
right. And the other thing I think, which is very relevant to today, is that there are a large number of people who are being uh, sort of, who are losing their jobs. And they might be, there's a lot of disruption happening, and they might be looking for learning experiences that allow them to get on to a new track, a career change, or a quick learning experience. I call it minimum viable reskilling, right?
Mhm.
And again, the online allows them to have a bigger choice, right? Uh, Before, when this happened, they were confined to looking around their own local neighborhood, maybe to a community college, because first of all, there are people who've just lost a job. They cannot pay $6,000 for a course, or they cannot pay tens of $1,000s for a new master's program, and it takes too long as well. They want something called what I would call minimum viable reskilling, right? And so and the options for them were limited before this digitization. They could go to a community college in the neighborhood, etc., and they might get good options there. I'm not denying that. But with digitization, suddenly they can go to NYU, they can go to Harvard, they can go to Stanford, and of course with the affordability that digitization brings, we at NYU are looking, and we're looking to start these shorter, more affordable learning experiences that allow people to then change careers and
Right.
quickly get on a new job, and then continue the longer term credentials, right? The master's programs and all, which will form the foundation on which they can build the career as they go. But they need something quickly and affordable, and flexible. And I think digitization can provide all that.
Right. No, I think absolutely right in terms of making sure that people get what they are, what their job demands or what their career aspirations are,
Right.
and getting that. I see. I personally, this is something that I have observed. Where I think would be good to get your thoughts on is that what has happened in the last few years with digital modules being available
Mhm.
is anyone who wants to learn something can tactically learn a specific skill or a specific program, a language, or a specific kind of course, right? But that has also kind of lopsided the expectation that I just go take a threat hunting course and I become a cybersecurity person and I get a job, or um, this has also brought in a lot of random learning rather than
Mhm.
an organized learning, which is where I think is the strong point of organizations like universities like NYU, right? You provide a curriculum and that holistically prepares someone to do a job better or become a researcher or become a teacher, right?
Right.
With
Right.
the random learning, and then this is personal, and I'm sure that many in the audience probably would share that as well, that my staff at my day job at EY, or some of the clients that we work with, or some members at CFF, they have people who think they're interested in something, they go randomly learn something. What is your guidance to people actually aspiring to become something and having an organized learning? Who are the thing? I mean, is it going to be an NYU curating that, or is it going to be an industry body such as CFF and organization creating that? Where do you go for that direction?
Yeah, so what you said was very beautifully said. In fact, I was talking to a CISO, I don't want to name the person, just last week, and I was talking about the value of a master's program or programs curated by NYU. And his first reaction was like, I just want them to do certain tasks, and if they, as long as they know to do that, that's enough. And I felt that was very short-sighted, because you're just getting sort of almost a mechanical person rather than an intelligent person. And my thinking was limited until I heard from you, right? That on one hand, you had the training folks, right, who just give very specific tools. Do this. You learn to use a particular tool or a particular framework, right? That may work well for people who already sort of have a solid foundation of science and technology. And on the other hand, there were people like us who were just giving the foundation, right, which was bulky. And when you talked about the vision of the Cyber Future Foundation, and I think the right thing needs to be the right mechanisms and experiences can be created in partnership with organizations like CFF and other industry, I think. Because I think just the university or just industry or just training companies cannot do the job. I think, as you said, either it becomes some random learning or shallow learning, or it becomes too much, too bulky, which they're not ready for yet. Yes, you want to make them scientists and engineers. You want to provide them at least the opportunity to think as a researcher at some point in their life, if they reach that point, right? Not everybody will do that, but what we need is then this curation that achieves the compromise of giving them experiences that are valuable in the job, get them to quickly get a job, at the same time lay foundation as a scientist, right? And I think that needs a partnership between industry and academics, because I tell people I've never had a real job in my life, so I don't know what people do when they are protecting the enterprise network. I mean, I kind of conceptually know, but I've not sort of fought the battle in the trenches, right? I've not but I think to give the right learning experiences, I need to talk to people who fight the battle in the trenches. And the people who fight in the battle in the trenches need to understand about the science and engineering also, because that makes them better soldiers, right? Especially in the context of cybersecurity.
Yeah, no, I think you just nailed it in terms of actually curating this knowledge and your experience in teaching, right? And from what you're hearing from your from your network, uh, I think it's important for us to come together and have a balanced approach to this.
Right.
When we say comprehensive, industry uses the word comprehensive, I think, too overtly.
Mm.
It's not comprehensive; it has to be balanced, because uh, we need cyber capacity and we need cyber talent now.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they will just learn one thing and they'll just deliver there, because they would not have the knowledge of where their particular skill set is being applied to, right? I think
Right.
that's where the bigger picture that's missing. The next thing that that I've been kind of pondering over quite a few time is that you have actually a lot of CFF friends and networks who are part of NYU and actively involved. Now we have Andrea, we have Nag, we have MJ,
Mhm.
our
Mhm.
colleague BY, and they have tried to bring that breadth of industry as well as their professional focus into it. What is your kind of guidance and or even the ask to industry to participate beyond just one cyber technical aspect? I mean, where do you see the collaboration being? And I'm naturally, there is a law part, there is a NYU management and business MBA part. Where do you see that collaboration across functions coming from?
So, helping academia understand that uh, being a good cybersecurity engineer is not simply just learning network security, application security, and whatever. Not just learning some technical tools. It's more than that. What does it mean to be a well-rounded cybersecurity professionals? Because academia normally quite often consists of experts, right? Professors who are extremely good at what they do. They have deep knowledge of their subject, but they don't know that in practice where it fits in context, right? And what are the other pieces that need to come together? And so I've learned a lot by talking to people that you named, MJ and Norm, and things of that sort. And we've changed our ways in NYU. We now have a joint program with the law school in cybersecurity. We have now a specialization that MJ is helping me create in management of technology and cybersecurity, etc. And the other schools doing this as well. It's not just NYU. So that's one way in which you could help us. And also, it's not just a program, right? I mean, I think students need to engage with professionals like you, with professionals like MJ, because that's when they see the path, right? See what they could become. And me telling them this is important or that is important may not be that have that impact because I'm just another professor, right? But someone who has experience in industry, who does this for a living, has that real life experience, would have better impact. And by helping, by mentoring our students, by teaching for us, by giving guest lectures, and by interacting with faculty, and I think I don't know I answered your question completely, but I think at least in these ways that come to my mind
Yeah.
that you could help academia. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And again, that comes with the hook, right? There is an expectation on the academia to
Right.
see how they can supply, and especially with the current, uh, you know, there is a renewed emphasis, and there is actual practical social, I would say, ask for a change, right? I mean, industry has a lot of diversity programs, and specifically, I would say at my day job at EY, we have been emphasizing on the need for diversity. But in cybersecurity specifically, there is no real diversity
Oh,
in play,
yes.
right? And if
Oh,
they,
yes.
so what is your take on that? And that is where I think the industry and academia need to work together, because if there is not a diverse talent being directed to academia and to the industry through academia, then I think it will be very hard for industry to directly go tap into talent and from scratch. We are trying,
Yeah.
and as
Right.
we've been working with
Right. Right.
schools, high schools, academic, but there is just not enough pipeline of diversity. We still the same kind of people, and then it's very disturbing, right? I mean, I'm going
That's
to
true.
personally tell you, I'm disappointed to see what can we do more between industry and academia to expand that diversity cause.
Yeah, so that's a very, very important point, especially today when there's an awareness that is rising about the lack of diversity in educational programs, right? So I myself saw this about 8 to 10 years back, that there was a lack of diversity, and I think I picked the easier problem. And what I did for some time now, so when I was doing Seesaw, right, that large cybersecurity event, I remember walking into the gym during the finals, looking around, and I'm seeing, holy, there's only mostly people of one or two characteristics, right, sitting in that room, and there were no women. There were very few minorities, and I started working on the women issue. I ran now. We still run summer camps for women in cybersecurity. We got women teachers and started teaching them cybersecurity. We started running women-only clubs, after-school clubs for cybersecurity in some New York City schools, right? And now we have some improvement, right? So 20-25% in cybersecurity, and Tandon actually as a whole actually picked up on a lot of these things, and we have about 46% women in the engineering school, which is remarkable, right? In the incoming freshman class. Of course, just getting them is not enough. Actually, graduating them is the important criteria. But nevertheless, we're getting for 46%, 43% in our freshman class. But I failed in other areas, right? They are we at Tandon, although we are in Brooklyn, we don't reflect the population of Brooklyn at all, right? And that's a shame. And we need to do something about it. And actually, just in the last 2-3 days, last week, I've been thinking about this, that what one can do. I'm beginning by reaching out to minority faculty, because that's the same thing I've done with women, minority professionals, right? I'm reaching out to them saying, come and teach for us, please. Because it's the role models, right, that inspire young people. When they see that, hey, I can do it too. There's somebody else who has done it. And I did this women, I think, quite a lot, and I think it was reasonably successful. The second is affordable pathways, right? So, for example, our Cyber Fellows program, which only cost 16,000 for the entire masters, Bridgewater came and gave a scholarship and said half off for underrepresented folks, right? So now we're giving a master's in cybersecurity just for $8,000, right, to underrepresented minorities. And I think it has to be both ways. I cannot go to industry and say, hey, give me scholarships for underrepresented minorities.
Right.
I have to put half the money myself, or more than half the money myself, right? And then say, give me the rest. Let's make it really attractive.
Yeah.
So together in partnership, create affordable opportunities, create the right environment, create mentorships, and these things immediately come to my mind. But I still think the problem is harder, deeper than that. And I would love to sort of think more about this with CFF and other such organizations. There's ICMCP, there's
Yeah.
Power, there's many other organizations. I'd like to sort of focus some time on this and devote some time to it and try and address this problem, because I think it's a serious problem we face today. It's
Yeah.
not a good thing at all.
I mean, absolutely. And Dr. Memon, we welcome your intent and uh, your initiative to partner. I think this is something that we must solve. To reflect who we serve, right? And I think
Right.
to serve the organizations and the public, we should be in a position where we reflect where we are. And I think physically, I think we have a great opportunity where NYU is situated.
Right.
As you know, we have been working with LaGuardia Community College and others
Yes, yes,
just
I'm
there,
working
right,
with
where
them
we
too.
can
Yeah.
actually bring them together.
Mhm.
I think we have the right network. We have to apply our network and
Right.
our resources to these right problems where it is absolutely highlighted at the right time. There is no better time than now to solve this, because now I think you just this talk itself, you highlighted few things that could be our resources. First is digitization, the remote flexibility that we got. Second, the affordability that this digitization and online media provides. The coming together of the different organizations, both public and private, to support these kind of the initiatives, and for the great interest that we have built in the young people to come in and be not only cyber experts or leaders, but also to apply cyber to any other work stream or field that they want, be it law,
Right.
be it management. So
Right.
I think I absolutely welcome, and this was a great discussion. Remember, always is, but particularly being focused on the topic today of making a cyber education affordable, getting and expanding the reach and increasing the diversity. We can get to a very humble social cause and actually make an impact. So thank you for joining us.
Sure. You're
I'm
welcome.
sure this is to be continued. And to conclude this program, I would like to highlight our next week's guest is going to be Kristen Todd. She was the executive director on the Commission for Cybersecurity Education that was put together by NIST in 2016. And in fact, that's where we took a lot of motivation from organizing our strategy at Cyber Future Foundation. Since then, she has gone on to put together the Cyber Readiness Institute. And as a great resource, I welcome those who joined us to be back with us next Tuesday noon. It will be a great session. And we'll post this session with Dr. Memon's permission online.
Sure.
This will be available, and again to expand the reach of cybersecurity education, as well as all the great intent that the community has to a wider audience. Thank you again. Be safe, be well, and we will see you next week. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Al. And
Cheers.
thank you to all the attendees. Thank you.